The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. If the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble by us, and I for one must be content to remain an agnostic. A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. Intelligence is based on how efficient a species became at doing the things they need to survive. If I had my life to live over again, I would have made a rule to read some poetry and listen to some music at least once every week. Blushing is the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. I am not apt to follow blindly the lead of other men. I see no good reasons why the views given in this volume should shock the religious views of anyone. A man's friendships are one of the best measures of his worth. Animals, whom we have made our slaves, we do not like to consider our equal. An American monkey, after getting drunk on brandy, would never touch it again, and thus is much wiser than most men. Man selects only for his own good, nature only for that of the being which she tends. Great is the power of steady misrepresentation, but the history of science shows that fortunately this power does not long endure. There is no fundamental difference between man and animals in their ability to feel pleasure and plan, happiness and misery. I see no good reasons why the views given in this volume should shock the religious views of anyone. My mind seems to have become a kind of machine for grinding general laws out of large collections of facts. Freedom of thought is best promoted by the gradual illumination of men's minds which follows from the advance of science. I have tried lately to read Shakespeare and found it so intolerably dull that it nauseated me. To kill an error is as good a service as, and sometimes even better than, the establishing of a new truth or fact. One general law leading to the advancement of all organic beings, namely, multiply, vary, let the strongest live and the weakest die. On the ordinary view of each species having been independently created, we gain no scientific explanation. It is always advisable to perceive clearly our ignorance. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. I am not the least afraid to die. A scientific man ought to have no wishes, no affections, a mere heart of stone. We are always slow in admitting any great change of which we do not see the intermediate steps. I love fools' experiments. I am always making them. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. I cannot persuade myself that a beneficent and omnipotent God would have designedly created parasitic wasps with the express intention of their feeding within the living bodies of caterpillars. We will now discuss in a little more detail the struggle for existence. We can allow satellites, planets, suns, universe, nay whole systems of universe to be governed by laws, but the smallest insect we wish to be created at once by special act. It is a cursed evil to any man to become as absorbed in any subject as I am in mine. How paramount the future is to the present when one is surrounded by children. Besides love and sympathy, animals exhibit other qualities connected with the social instincts which in us would be called moral. I have called this principle, by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved, by the team of natural selection. One general law leading to the advancement of all organic beings, namely, multiply, vary, let the strongest live and weakest die. Only picture to yourself a nice soft wife on a sofa with good fire and books and music. Whilst man, however well behaved, at best is but a monkey shaved. One hand has surely worked throughout the universe. Often a cold shudder has run through me, and I have asked myself whether I may have not devoted myself to a fantasy. It is difficult to believe in the dreadful but quiet war lurking just below the serene facade of nature. We stop looking for monsters under our beds when we realize they are inside us. It is necessary to look forward to a harvest, however distant that may be, when some fruit will be reaped, some good effected. What wretched doings come from the ardor of fame, the love of truth alone would never make one man attack another bitterly. A moral being is one who is capable of reflecting on his past actions and their motives, of approving of some and disapproving of others. Light will be thrown on the origin of man and his history. The survival of preservation of certain favored words in the struggle for existence is natural selection. It is those who know little, and not those who know much, who so positively assert that this or that problem will never be solved by science. Man is descended from a hairy-tailed quadruped, probably arboreal in its habits. It is not the biggest, the brightest, or the best that will survive, but those who adapt the quickest. Free will is to mind what chance is to matter. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. Freedom of thought is best promoted by the gradual illumination of men's minds which follows from the advance of science.